often knock people off their feet, usher in a lot of hot air, and the next morning they reveal the debris that needs to be cleared so that others might keep going on. There's usually a miracle story of someone originally written off, kind of emerging alive. And then there's that vow to fight on. The media tells us where the power is down, a pole has been uprooted, and now everybody's blaming the president. You can rarely predict the big moments during primary season. The hurricane season, that's another story. With Mother Nature, we often know that there's going to be a lot of grandstanding and posturing on her part, and there will be no chads left hanging. Frankly, whether we're speaking about a hurricane, an earthquake, a biochemical attack, whether we're speaking of a major weather event, or the result of someone's evil intent, we can almost always conclude that the impact will be consequential. And just as important, and I might add, if not more important, to our discussion this morning, we can almost always conclude that somewhere along the way, there was a disaster that occurred well before a levee ever broke or a tornado ever touched down. Well before someone intending harm ever boarded a plane, configured a bomb, or loaded a weapon. The tragedy before the tragedy is that it just might, not always, but just might have been prevented, or the consequences mitigated, or more lives saved. Somewhere before that tragedy, somewhere before the point of impact, we were not ready. We missed something. In the communication, the coordination, the collaboration, something, somewhere went awry. And each time that happens, we need to identify what that something was, correct it, and make darn sure it doesn't happen again. You know, the public will forgive accidents. They will not forgive arrogance, complacency, bureaucracy. And they certainly will not forgive a lack of preparation. So I'm very pleased to join you for this discussion on how emergency management has evolved over the last decade and how we can continue to improve America's state of readiness. In my flight here yesterday, I happened to pick up a copy of the magazine The Economist. There are a couple of articles on international disasters, and after one of the short articles, they concluded with a sentence that I think is very telling and very appropriate for this conference. The writer concluded that, quote, disasters are inevitable. The consequences need not be. Think about that. Frankly, you just heard from one of the great leaders in the field of emergency management, Craig Fugate. I was privileged to work with him when he was directing Florida's efforts when I was secretary. He has he's been a strong proponent of public-private sector partnerships in emergency management. I know he alluded to that in his remarks. And I think that recognition that a government alone can't make a parish, a county, a state, or a community better prepared or more resilient is a very important conclusion for all of us to understand and appreciate, but I do think most emergency management professionals do. So I'll pivot off of some of that same notion with just a bit broader look at how this collaborative, all-in view of preparedness, response, and recovery has transformed all-hazard emergency management over the last decade, and how it will continue to transform how we prepare and respond in the future to events here in the U.S. and with our friends when international disaster occurs. What many of us have come to appreciate through our experiences responding to disasters, and frankly, I responded to quite a few when I was governor, and it was pointed out to you when I was congressman, 3 tornadoes bounced around my congressional district in May of 1985. Tremendous damage in 3 communities in 3 of my 4 counties. And the second disaster in Nevada was FEMA. So I took it upon myself and a lot of other people in the process to kind of restructure FEMA's not only organization but mindset and how it went about assisting primarily the public sector in recovery from these disasters. So on those many experiences, one of the things I've also learned is whether it was in Albion, Pennsylvania, Atlantic, Pennsylvania, Wheatland, Pennsylvania, any of the places that I saw in PA as Gov or when I was Secretary. First, one of the basic foundations of our ability to recover is the resilience of spirit we have in this country. We're a really resilient country. One thing we say to ourselves 10 years after 9/11, we're a resilient country. And that's very important. We understand and appreciate it. We've seen it through U.S. history and through the lens of major events. The Johnstown floods a long time ago in PA, the Northbridge earthquake, Hurricane Andrew, Katrina, 9/11. We certainly witnessed the power of the resilient spirit along the Gulf Coast after the tragedy of Hurricane Katrina and the BP oil spill. And more recently, the wildfires in Texas and California and devastating tornadoes in Alabama. But from community to community, within that much broader community called the United States, we've all seen smaller scale disasters that are no less devastating than those I previously mentioned. And yet the desire to go on emerges from the ashes, the floodwaters, or the ruins. As a country and as communities, we have never thrown up our hands and given in, given way, or given up. That's just not the American way. And I'm confident that's not the way of our international colleagues who I'm told join us from over 24 countries here during this conference. Clearly, the past year has been a challenging year for the world's emergency managers. Think about this.